Hello there, welcome back to Game Night. Today I thought it would be fun to do a little recap of Gen Con. And I'm just going to be tapping on random games, not necessarily from Gen Con, but this one I just like the sound of the box, so tapping on it for some nice sounds. So, if you don't know what Gen Con is, it is the largest board gaming convention in the US, and maybe the world, I'm not really sure, where a larger board gaming convention would be. It's pretty big, to the point where it's kind of overwhelming sometimes. And even though I played games pretty much the whole time I was there, I probably only saw like 2% of the convention that there was to see. There's just so much stuff, so many new games, so many activities to do. It's impossible to see it all. But I did get quite a few games in, and so I thought I would do a ranking of all of the new games that I played at Gen Con. So I don't think all of these are new to the market games, but these are just all the games that were new to me that I got to try while I was there. Take these ratings with a grain of salt, given that I only played them once or half of the time during a convention type setting, so that's just my initial read on the games. I'll also say none of these games were unpleasant to play, so I kind of feel bad having a game at the lowest end of the ranking, but such is life. So, the lowest end, my least favorite game that I tried at Gen Con was Agree to Disagree. This kind of had a cool concept where you try to guess who has the same opinions as you, who has the opposite opinion as you. But it wasn't the most intriguing game. Good for maybe like a light party game, but not a lot of playtime, I would think, for Agree to Disagree. We did have a couple lively debates, but definitely not my favorite game. The next game up is Neotopia. We played this on the first day, and it was a really beautiful game. Seemed like a cool style, cool sci-fi kind of a city that they had designed for the game, but the gameplay wasn't the most interesting. It was mostly placing colored pieces into patterns, which wasn't not fun, but not the most complex strategy, not the most riveting game that we played. The next one up was Retrograde, and Retrograde also had a really cool concept. It was like a board game version of a arcade game. It was like a Space Invaders game, and I think thing that I liked most about the game is they had a round of like speed rolling. So rather than taking turns, you're all just rolling as quickly as possible to get a certain combination of dice. And there's, depending on the combination you get, there are a number of different cards that match those combinations. So you're rolling as quickly as possible and then also trying to grab the card as quickly as possible before anyone else takes it from you. So I liked that concept for the game, the speedy rolling. But I guess my qualm with it is the game had sort of like a printed notepad of the like Space Invaders screen, and then you rip off a piece of paper each time you play it. So kind of by that fact alone, it is not a game with infinite replayability. I wish they had made it sort of like a dry erase board format so that you could play the game without running out of sheets. So yeah, it was fun. It was really cute. But I don't think I would buy it for myself. I'm gonna take out another random game to tap on. The next game, I guess this is fourth from the bottom, was Morgan's Magic Map. This was the first game that we played when we arrived to Gen Con, and it was a nice little quaint game. My friend really liked it because it was sort of the similar format to an old game called Labyrinth. So if you've ever played that, it's similar, where you have all these different squares and you're shifting them around the map as you move around the map, which is a fun concept. And then of course it's pirate themed, like Captain Morgan, pirate map. And so you're trying to get the best treasure for the game. I would definitely play this game again, but it's not the most memorable. If you are this far in the video and enjoying it, then comment a little sword emoji, thank you. On the positives, it had really quick turns, not too difficult to learn, a little bit of strategizing, but yeah, kind of, decent game. The next game that I have on my ranking is a game that I technically kind of napped during. It was a two-player game because it is a card battler. So since there were 5 of us, I sort of observed from the sidelines. And it was in the game demo room, playtesting room, that's what it's called. So that's where when people are developing their games, they first play test them with various groups of people, then gather some feedback and tweak the game for the final copy. So the name of the game was Battle for Justice, and it was so early on that they were just starting to print their prototype of the game. But like I mentioned, it is a card battler type game, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or something like that, which, as you can probably tell by my channel, isn't my go-to style of game. However, the game creator, he was there. Hello, if you're watching this. He said his mission in creating this game was to have there be sort of more of an even playing field between extremely experienced and first-time players. So, in a lot of these games, the experienced player that's been collecting Magic cards or Yu-Gi-Oh cards for a dozen years, and has seen every single style of gameplay and has played every strategy you could, they're most likely always going to win against a newcomer to the game. And so Battle for Justice is kind of an intriguing prospect for me as someone who doesn't do card battler type games, because it means that even if I'm newer to it, I still have a chance. And then also for people who have played card battlers their whole life, it's also a good idea because I imagine it would be difficult to find the perfect pairing of people to play with. If you're playing with someone who's newer, it might be an easy win, not too fun. If you're playing with someone who's super experienced, you probably go in knowing you're going to lose. Sort of a predestined end result of the game. So Battle for Justice kind of making the format where it's more of an even playing field was very interesting. So if you know about other card battlers like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic the Gathering, a big part of the game is collecting cards, and they can get extremely, extremely expensive. And so this game doesn't have that card collecting aspect to it. You buy, there's 4 different species of cards, like fish and humans and things like that. And you buy whichever pack you want, and that's the one you play with. But it doesn't have the card collecting aspect where, if you buy the $1 million card, then you'll auto win every time. So I appreciate that too. But like I said, I'm not very experienced in card battling games in general, so I put this one a little bit in the middle. No offense to the game creator, hopefully he's not mad. The next one up is also a game that's not in my usual preferred style, but it is very well regarded, and that is Starfinder. So I do play Pathfinder, the second one, but I hadn't played Starfinder before. And if you don't know what either of those things are, they're like Dungeons and Dragons, D&D. And if you don't know what that is, it is the game that they play in Stranger Things in the Hellfire Club. So it is a tabletop role-playing game. And Starfinder, as you can imagine, is a sci-fi themed version of D&D. So usually those games are fantasy. This one is sci-fi. And I had a lot of fun doing the mission. There were some people at our table that had like characters that they built out and sort of like built a lore behind, built the story behind, which was really fun to see kind of how they imagined their characters interacted in this space world. But in general, role-playing games are not my usual. I suppose I need to give them more of a shot, which is why I tried it out. but I think a lot of times the role-playing it's just a different style. So if you go in to play a game for the strategy and the math, interesting game mechanics, that's usually not something you'll find as much in role-playing games. Starfinder and Pathfinder kind of tried to bulk that up more than D&D. There's definitely more strategy in it, but it still has to let go of a little bit of that structure in order to allow room for the role-playing. So, I really enjoyed it. I was a big fan, and the GM did a lovely job leading the mission for us. But in general, role-playing games maybe aren't what I'm looking for. But if you're looking for a role-playing game that's a little bit more strategic than D&D, or if you're looking for a role-playing game that's sci-fi instead of fantasy, you should definitely give Starfinder a try. The next game in my ranking is Magic Maze. I really loved Magic Maze, and pretty much from this point on, all of the games are lovely. But yeah, I loved Magic Maze. The concept of the game is really unique. I haven't really seen this kind of format before. There's absolutely no talking allowed, and not even visual cues allowed aside from intently staring at a person. I think that's actually what they say in the rules. And so the object of the game is to carry out a heist, steal some items without communicating with your fellow robbers. And once you steal the item, there's a timed component to it. So it's very hectic, a lot of intentionally staring and trying to get people to do what they're supposed to do. I guess I should mention every single person has different abilities, so if you want to go through a portal or go up, down, left, right, and you don't have that ability, then you have to wait for someone else to do it, but you can't tell them to do it. So it's a very hectic game, and we got very intense, which is not bad. This game I actually did get at Gen Con, but I did not play it there, so I won't talk about it in this ranking. I haven't played it yet, so, but I will tap on it. The next game on the ranking, I'm kind of doing some conjecture because we sort of just played a third of a game. But it's Terra Mystica, which is actually quite an older game. Not sure when, but upon initial glance of Terra Mystica, it sort of has the style and format of Catan, but it's a way more complex game from what we gathered. Each player is a different species, or I guess different community. There's alchemists and nomads, witches, and you all have different abilities. They also have a religion component to it. So there's a lot of different ways to get points in Terra Mystica. There's not just one single path. And then one of my favorite things in a game is there's variability between each game. So every single game you'll put out different point scoring mechanisms for each round of gameplay, and then you'll shuffle them up and randomize them every single time, so the strategy that you'll have for the game will change every single time. And I really love that sort of variability or customization in a game because it usually means it's extremely replayable. You can't sort of like crack the code and figure out the best strategy because every game will require a different strategy. This game might be higher on my ranking in the future, but like I said, we only played it for a brief moment before we had to go to another event. So for now, that's where I'm putting it. The next game, this is fourth place, is Decrypto. Decrypto is sort of like a code names type game. It's a word association type game. And I don't play tons of word games. Sometimes you're just in the mood for a word game, you know? They're a little bit more lighthearted and silly and yelling with your friends, which I very much enjoy. So, Decrypto, the concept is you're giving clues. You're on 2 different teams, and you're trying to correctly guess the clues for your own team while also correctly guessing the clues for the other team. So whichever team can better deduce the clues wins. So this is sort of a similar structure to a lot of word association games, but the things that make it stand out is sort of like the listening in, the eavesdropping, the spying required for the game, and then also you're trying to sort of make the clues as vague as possible while still also making sure your team knows what they mean. And so it's quite tricky to sort of find that balance between a clue that's too obvious and a clue that's so hard that absolutely no one will get it, not even your own team. So I really enjoyed Decrypto. It's also a pretty quick game, so you can squeeze it in or play a couple rounds. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. The next game, I sort of did a half and half of 2 similar games that we played from the same game creator, Themeborn. So, Themeborn does Escape the Dark Castle, I believe was their first game. And then they did Escape the Dark Sector, which is similar but sci-fi themed. And then the game that they were demoing, sort of play testing at Gen Con was The Last of Us. So sort of taking the existing game structure that they had built out, adding a little bit to it, and then also incorporating the storyline of The Last of Us. That's my cat buddy. Trying to get his kibble. So we played a little bit of Escape the Dark Castle, and then played a little bit of The Last of Us, and both of them were very enjoyable. We actually got Escape the Dark Castle, and they're currently doing pre-orders for their The Last of Us game. So the concept of the games are mostly like storytelling, which is usually not my type of game, but then they also have combat with dice, and so the combat is essentially trying to roll the same dice that your opponents are rolling in order to beat them. And then specifically for the Last of Us game, similar to, the zombie apocalypse of The Last of Us, you have to divide and conquer and sort of strategize who you're going to send on which mission, if you're going to stick together and go slow and steady, or split up so that you can get through it faster. And the game does have a timer to it, so speed is of the essence. So yeah, we really enjoyed playing both of these games, and I also really enjoyed sort of the minimalist art of the games. They're all black and white, and I don't know, the artwork just really fit with the vibe and really told the story, so I really appreciated those games. So that was third from the top. The second place is going to be Mille Fiori, which I think is Italian and I don't really know how to say. In style and visuals, it's sort of similar to Azul or Sagrada, if you've played those. So the concept of Mille Fiori is you are glass manufacturers, and you place glass in these patterns, and then that glass is used to make jewelry, vases, etc., and then you ship it off and sell it. And so it kind of has a similar feel to Azul, like I stated, but there's a lot more strategy to it because there's a lot of different ways to gather points. So there's a lot of different glass patterns that you can do with different point structures, and then you can get points by helping ship the merchandise. You can get points through making the items themselves, making the jewelry, and so there's a lot more thought that you have to put into Mille Fiori than to Azul. So if you liked Azul or Sagrada but wanted something a little bit more in-depth, a little bit more mathematical strategy, then definitely check out Mille Fiori. The last game, which was my number one from Gen Con, was Blood on the Clock Tower. So Blood on the Clock Tower is like a lot of bluffing games, werewolf, bang, mafia, Shadowhunters. A lot of these games sort of have this similar structure where there are good and bad people, and people are dying in the town, and you're trying to figure out and execute whoever is bad. So Blood on the Clock Tower kind of takes that concept and takes it to the extreme. There's apparently 100 different possible characters, and so each game you can sort of formulate a different mix of characters that can interact with one another. And then the game goes from maybe like 6 players, that's the minimum, up to 20 players, and preferably as close to 20 as you can, because that'll make it more confusing and crazy and wild and difficult to win the game, which is fun. The other thing that I really loved about this game that other games don't really have is there is a GM, Game Master, that is actually sort of interfering and swaying the game. A lot of these games don't even have a GM, or if they do, the GM is sort of an impartial party, just helping guide the story but not influencing it at all. But in Blood on the Clocktower, they actually do sort of influence it. So, for example, one of the characters is the town drunk. The town drunk thinks that they are actually one of the other characters in the game, so they might think that they are the local chef, or they might think that they are the slayer, the vigilante in the town. But since they are the drunk character, the GM can make the decision whether or not the drunk actually does what they think they're doing. So, in that way, the GM can sort of make sure that the game is evened out. If they see that at the very beginning of the game, one side is coming out on top a little bit too quickly, they can sway it in favor of the other side. I thought that was really interesting, and in most games I don't really want to be the GM. You know, I'll do it if needed, but it's not my preferred role. But after playing Blood on the Clocktower, I actually would really love to try being the GM for that game. So yeah, I would say, I mean, I of course only played once. I think we played with like 12 people, maybe more. But I would say it's like one of the best executed like bluffing type games that I've played so far. One of my other favorite like bluffing type games is Resistance, and that's because it's like the complete opposite. It's like the bluffing type game in its most boiled down, simple format, and Blood on the Clocktower is the opposite end of that spectrum. It's a bluffing type game taken to the extreme. They've thought through everything. They have a million different variables so that you can play a million different games and not get bored. So yeah, that was my favorite game from Gen Con, and like I said, there are so many games at Gen Con, it's impossible to even play, you know, a small percent of them. Those are just the ones that I got to try out. I also didn't include any games that I played again at Gen Con, so like played Dominant Species and Dominion and things like that, but I didn't think that was a fair ranking because I've played those games a lot. So this is just games that I've played for the first time at Gen Con. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I will see you